Hey Church Girl, welcome to Church Girl Gang, a podcast where we get to talk about life, living for Jesus, and everything in between, and how that affects us in the here and now. My name is Kenzie, and I'll be your host, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation with you. Hey Church Girl, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad that you've decided to join us today for another episode of Church Girl Gang. Just a reminder, my name is Kenzie and I am your host, and today we are going to be having a conversation with my good friend Makayla, but before we get into that, I do want to give you a quick warning. Mom and Dad, if you have any kiddos in the car with you today, we are going to be talking about godly, biblical, holy things, but we are going to be talking about the conversation of purity. And so that is up to you today, whether you want your kiddos to be in on that conversation, but just a forewarning there. But with that being said, let's get right into our conversation with Makayla. Okay, so you've already mentioned a little bit that you have your own story about struggling with purity. Can you share that story with us?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
So there's so many different parts to it, but I'm just going to summarize a lot.
Yeah.
So I think I remember being so young, and the very first kind of porn experience that I had was, it was when YouTube came out, and it was awesome, and everyone was like, ooh, YouTube.com,
Yeah.
And so I think I was probably 8 years old.
Mm.
And my friend was showing me, oh, look, there's music videos on YouTube. And I was like, cool, I love music. And so we're watching YouTube videos. And I remember seeing things that I've never seen before, and sexual things. Mm-hmm. And something inside of me being like, that's interesting, And that's really how it starts, is a curiosity, a genuine curiosity. Mm-hmm. At that age, your sex drive isn't revved up and ready to go, So, which is just wild. I think most statistics that I've seen on porn use say that the average age that kids are exposed to porn is age 11.
Wow. And
I think of 11-year-olds I know, and I'm like, no way. They're tiny kids, And so at that point, when I was just 8, my parents were very, very protective and involved in my life. And so I wouldn't have been able to watch porn even if I tried,
yeah.
And so I'm so grateful for how much they protected us. Mm-hmm. But I think that's just how it began, was when I would go over to friends' houses who maybe had more liberty than I had in my home. And then they would show me things that I hadn't been exposed to before. And skipping through a lot of stuff, I think when I first got an iPhone and I was a teenager, that didn't go well.
Yeah.
And my parents checked my phone and everything. I mean, they held us accountable, but I was able to hide it for a while. And I just remember it getting so bad, because that's when I really started watching porn, and it getting so bad. And I just hated myself. The shame that I carried was just terrible. I mean, I'm a pastor's kid, and I'm leading worship. And it reminds me of that verse in the Bible where I think it's Paul who's like, I keep doing this thing that I don't want to do.
Yes.
And so that was me. It consumed me and it controlled me. Mm-hmm. And I remember just probably 15 years old, just bawling in my room and talking to God and asking him to take it from me. Mm-hmm. And those are my words. Can you please just take this away from me? I don't want this desire. Yeah. And I realize now I was asking him to take away my sex drive.
Yeah.
And he's not going to do that. That was a gift that he gave me.
Yeah.
I just wasn't managing it well, Mm-hmm. But I thought that's the only way to get rid of this. God, just take it away, whatever it is. I don't want it, And so fast forwarding through a lot, I think where my biggest breakthrough came is when I I exposed myself and, talked to my leaders about it, talked to my parents about it, and told all the ugly truth,
Yeah.
And so that was so hard, so hard.
Yeah.
But, as time went on, I think that was the thing that really made it a healing process for me, and which, the Bible says to confess your sins to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, like, whatever comes to light, the devil no longer has the power over,
Yes.
And so I think for me, that was what was really amazing. Is before I was like, I can't control this. I have no power. I'm powerless against this.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever I brought it to light, it was like there was this grace that came with it to overcome it.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been years and years since I've even had an urge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still just crazy for me to say, because it really, our society even is just now realizing, they're coming out with research that says porn addiction is actually real.
Yeah.
Like, it's a chemical thing in your brain.
Yeah.
Like, a brain on porn looks completely different than a brain not on porn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before, it was like, alcoholics, they go to rehab. Porn addicts, just pray about it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's definitely been a longer journey and process than that summary, but that kind of gives you an idea.
That was so good. One of my favorite things that you said about that was that God really started, doing a work in your life when you started bringing that issue out into the light and talking to your leaders about it, people that you trusted about it. One thing that I was on a relationship panel recently, and so we were talking about actually purity, this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I was saying was, the things that you keep in the dark, the things that you're putting in your closet, it's kind of like there's this monster in your closet. And when you're putting all of this away, in the dark, you're feeding this monster, and the more you feed it, the bigger it gets, and eventually it's going to come out and it's going to eat you alive if you are continuing to feed it in this way, And so really letting it out of the dark, out of that closet, bringing it into the light, that's what changes things. So that's awesome. Was that hard for you to do? How did you feel letting people know?
Yeah, I think the hardest for me was my parents, and it's not because of them. It was just because of my desire to, just please, and nobody wants to be looked at as a failure, by your parents, even if they say that you're not. It's just, nobody wants to give bad news about themselves to their parents.
Right.
So that was, it was really hard. There was a lot of tears, and I think they were shocked. Like I said, they checked my phone. So they did all of the right parental things that you do to make sure that your kid doesn't have to struggle with that,
Yeah.
But I think that's what's the most important part about my journey, was seeing how their love didn't change for me, because then it gave me a reference for, what God's love unconditionally looks like towards me. And I was actually able to receive that fully.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that they were kind of that representation to me.
So they reacted in a godly way, a way that encouraged you, helped move you from one place to another. That's awesome. How did you tell other people, not just them? And if so, how did you figure out who to talk to? Because I think, we can bring things into the light all day long, but if I'm struggling with porn and I go talk to my, ungodly buddy who's also struggling with porn, they're probably not going to be able to help me very well. Right. How do you choose the right people?
Well, I think I always ask myself, who can I go to that can actually do something about this, that can actually help? Yeah. So I know I talked to, there was a mentor of mine in our church that I spoke to. And I think there may have been just one other person, but especially because I was a leader in the church,
right.
I didn't want to talk about it until I was healed from it.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody can watch you bleed. So,
No, that's really good. And I think that's important too. Not everyone needs to know your business all the time.
Right.
And I think that's a healthy thing, to set healthy boundaries, I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Well, you've talked about this a little bit, but what has God taught you through this? Do you have any like biblical references that you might have for us that can help set us on a firm foundation for purity when we're talking about purity?
Yeah. I did want to say too.
Oh, sure.
It's cool now talking about this because I am married, right?
Right.
And, I totally just lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
What was I going to say? What in the world? Oh, yes. So I would say,
mm-hmm.
I'm sure I'm living in purity because I haven't had sex,
mm-hmm.
and that was my thing. Like, I haven't had sex, so I'm fine. It wasn't until I got freed from porn that I realized, wow, like I had no idea what living a pure life was like.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I wasn't having intercourse does not mean
right.
I was living with a heart of purity, And so I just want to say, like, if there's any church girl that has kind of thought, I'm saving sex for marriage, but I'll do this and this and this. Like, there's just so much more that God has for you.
You're stepping on toes.
Yeah. But really, like, there's just so much more freedom.
Yeah.
On the other side of it. And so, I am grateful that, the only person I've slept with is my husband. And I love that that's a part of our story and that we get to have the fruit of that. But I wish that I could have lived a pure life before,
mm-hmm.
More so. But, so there's a verse that I have pulled up here that I really love. I think it shares God's heart on sexual purity. It's 1 Corinthians 7.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, it's Paul talking to the Corinthians, and he says, now getting down to the questions you asked in your letter to me. First, is it a good thing to have sexual relations? Certainly, but only within a certain context.
Ooh.
It's good for a man to have a wife and for a woman to have a husband. Sexual drives are strong, but marriage is strong enough to contain them and provide for a balanced and fulfilling sexual life in a world of sexual disorder.
Mm.
So I just love that verse because Paul's like, certainly, of course, like God gave us sex as a gift and he wants us to enjoy it. But I always use this analogy with our students at youth. I tell them to imagine a flood, a devastating flood,
mm-hmm.
and like the houses are ruined and the cars are floating and everything's destroyed. And then imagine a dam with the water that's contained and calm.
Mm.
It's within its container, its proper container. And so you could look at the flood and say, oh, water is bad,
mm-hmm.
But really water is awesome. We just need to make sure it's within the right context, within the right container. And so sex is such a beautiful, powerful thing. And it's so strong that it has to be within marriage. And so I want to talk about that more in church.
Yeah.
Satisfying sex in marriage. Like, let's talk about that more because sometimes we're just like, wait. And then I don't know. I feel like some Christian girls are like, wait, what am I waiting for again?
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know. I just want to talk about that more.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. So something you were saying a minute ago really got me thinking. So I want to go back just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But for the girls who are wondering, like, okay, I'm not having like intercourse,
mm-hmm.
but how far is too far? That
mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Where am I crossing the line? My answer to that question is always, if you're following after Jesus, why are you trying to get close to that line? You know, like if you're following after Jesus, you better run as far as you can from that line. Now, some of us, we get caught up in things. We have struggles with things, like that's understandable. But if you're asking the question, how far is too far? It's you're never too far away from the line. Really, you're not. And if you're like you're saying, if you're not in the right context, it's not going to be good anyway. It's going to mess up your life. So run from that line. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so what can we do? That kind of brings us into our next question. What can we do to practice purity? We're talking about like the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty, and even like what should we do if we're struggling with purity? How can we help ourselves?
So I have a lot of practical things that have helped me, and pretty much I'm sure everything that comes out of my mouth is just from Moral Revolution, because I've just consumed all of their content and I love it. But
that's awesome. We're gonna link them down below.
Yeah.
So so y'all can check them out.
Totally, it's been so helpful. But I think so. They have this acronym, BHALT, BHALT.
Okay.
And so they say, you know, when you have an urge, it's because it's a need that's trying to get met. So we're not just sitting on the couch and then we think, let's go have sex with someone.
Right.
Just for no reason. Nobody does that. You're trying to meet a need. So what need are you trying to meet? So BHALT, am I bored? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And so for me with porn, it was always, I feel lonely right now, actually. And that provided a false sense of intimacy. And so false sense of connection even. So I think it's important from the day to day. One of the best things you can do for your purity is just take care of your basic needs. Like we're talking about a physical need here of a sex drive, right? So take care of your physical needs. Are you drinking enough water? And it sounds so small, but it's like, drink that water, girl.
Yes.
You know, go on a walk. There you go. You got it right there. Just working on my sexual purity.
I can't drink now. Water. I am thirsty.
But just like taking care of those needs and just getting serious about that, you know, because it's very hard to remain sexually pure if you're just not taking care of yourself. And that's the thing. Like we don't want to just minimize this behavior or take this behavior out of our life. We actually want to add something good. So I would add in the Father's love. If I'm going to stop watching porn, you know?
Yeah.
So it's this trade-off. God doesn't want us to just let go of the sin. He wants us to receive something good in return. And there's this woman who is amazing. Her name's Carrie Lloyd. And I remember her saying that when people come to her and say, I'm struggling with porn, she actually tells them, okay, well, I need you to not stop watching porn right now. And they're always completely shocked. And she's like, what's actually more important is getting to the root of why you're watching it. And we need to meet that need. So next time you're going to watch porn, I need you to just pause and write down why you're about to watch porn. And then we can move on to getting rid of the symptom. But first we need to know the problem.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
Wow. That was so helpful. That was awesome. I'm not sure that we exactly touched on this, but what is the benefit of purity? I'm kind of throwing this one at you, but why, why does it matter anyway? And does it actually make our life any better?
Well, also, I mean, I think that's a great question because a lot of church girls are probably asking that because they may come to a small group where, you know, a bunch of girls say, I've done this and this and this, and the leader says, God's grace is enough. And so I've had students in our youth come and say, okay, if God's grace is enough, then why? Like, can't I just go do it and then it's fine, you know? And I actually used to think that way as well, to be honest, growing up in the church, because there's all these stories of redemption. So you're like, yeah, well, it's not super important, but now being married, I'm just like, wow, I'm so thankful for the purity battles I won before marriage because they don't stop. Like you don't get married. this is what you think. You think I'm going to get married and then I can have sex forever and I'm fine. No, that's not what happens.
No?
Like lust just shows up differently,
Yeah.
you know? So lust is lust is lust. It doesn't matter. It's just going to take a different form if you haven't gotten rid of that spirit of lust in your life, you know? So now suddenly, I'm really interested in this person that's not my husband. Whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Oh man, I wish I took care of this before, you know?
Yeah.
But more than that, way more than that, is the intimacy that you get with the Lord.
Wow.
By keeping your heart pure.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my life verse is Matthew 5:8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just at a place where I don't want anything to hinder my time with the Lord. And I've seen how lust and sexual impurity has just stolen my intimacy with God. And that is the greatest tragedy to me.
Wow.
More than hurting my future marriage or hurting my spouse. It's just like there being space between me and God, because that's what shame does. He doesn't turn away from us when we sin. It's that shame makes us turn away from him. We can't look at a holy God when we're so full of, you know, all these things we think about ourselves. And so, yeah, that's the biggest reason for me, always.
That was so good. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that might be on your heart to share?
Yeah, I think with that also, I heard a lot growing up in the church to remain pure for my husband. Mm-hmm. And it's a sweet thought, you know. Yeah, my future husband, yay, like, let me be pure for you. And
you're welcome.
Yeah, right? But I just kind of figured out along the way that that's not really enough motivation to do something for some guy that may or may not come into my life. Uh-huh. And did you wait for me, or did you play around, you know? And you also hear, like, I remember this popular book, and it is a great book, but it came out that was about a girl who kept this gift for her husband, and then she gave her husband this gift on her wedding night. And so it was very much like me staying pure is only for my future spouse, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think I was being taught in the church for a while. And while it is a gift, especially to your marriage, like, there's so many battles you won't have to face if you guys both truly, really gave your hearts to God fully. Yeah. That is true, that marriage is a gift, but I just don't necessarily think it's for each other. And when we think that way, it's not enough motivation, but also it's devastating if you meet your spouse and they're not returning that gift. Yeah. And so I think it's so important for us to remember my purity is not for him. It's for me and God. Wow. That's what it's for our intimacy together. And this is why we see marriages all the time. You know, one spouse cheats on the other and then the other retaliates. Why? Because it's almost like their purity was only for each other. But no matter what my spouse says to me, it's not going to sway what I do, because my purity is for me and the Lord. Wow. And I want to honor him with my body.
All right. And that was the end of our conversation with Makayla. Makayla, I just can't say enough. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your heart. And I know that some of these things, even though it's something you're really passionate about, I know it can't always be easy sharing all of these things with the entire interweb. So thank you for doing that. And we are going to do our longstanding tradition of something fun. So just a reminder, if you haven't joined us before, something fun is just us celebrating together about something awesome that's been going on in our lives. And if you want your own something fun to be featured on the podcast, that means that we are going to say it out loud on the podcast. Your something fun, you can be featured here. Be sure to share that on any of our social media platforms, just look for Church Girl Gang, or you can find me at Kenzie Carisse. Slide into my DMs, comment on the YouTube video down below. We'll look for all of that, and we will share your something fun right here on the podcast. Some girls have already done that, and that's been a really cool thing to get to highlight some of our other church girls that are listening. But right now we're going to share, both of us, Makayla and I, we're going to share something fun. And so I want you, wherever you're at, to just clap along with us in your seats, or if you're standing, then we're just standing. All right, Makayla, what do you have for us?
Okay. Well, it requires a backstory. Okay. So when I was in kindergarten, I would take this little water bottle to school, right? I would fill it with root beer. That's before, all the research came out about how horrible soda is for you. Well, I would take it and then I would drink all of it. But then I don't know what started this, but I would just kind of smell my cup when I was done drinking out of it.
Yeah.
I know. It's super weird. But I would smell my cup. And then this one time I smelled my cup and it literally smelled like the worst thing I've ever smelled in my life.
I'm so nervous.
Since that day, I don't drink out of reusable water bottles. Okay. That's how traumatic it was.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't. So I just use regular water bottles. I know it's horrible for the environment. I actually hate it about myself, and I've been wanting to change for 23 years. Well, -5, okay?
Okay.
So since I just moved to Nashville, I was like, it's time for a change.
Yeah.
I think I have the boldness to face this fear,
Oh my gosh.
So I was at Whole Foods. I saw this cute little hydro flask, and I was like, you know what? I can do this. And it has now been 5 days, and I have not had a water bottle. I've only been using this reusable water bottle, and I'm proud of myself.
That's so good. Way to go.
So there it is. Let's celebrate.
Have you been like, yes, that's so good. Have you been like cleaning it like religiously to make sure it doesn't smell? Or,
yeah, it actually doesn't smell. I don't know. Good. It's metal. So.
Right.
Yeah, just weird things. I don't know.
I love that.
I really don't know. I can't explain this, but.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, well, here's my something fun. I'm so excited for you entering into the world of water bottles. Okay, so here's my something fun. As you can see, I'm in what I like to call the outdoor studio, but I'm here outside, and the weather is so good. It's pretty hot out here, actually. I'm in the middle of Austin, Texas. So if you're not from Austin and you've heard that it gets a little hot here. But anyway, the weather is starting to heat up. I am a big paddle boarder. People may not know this about me, but I'm that's my favorite thing. I heard that they were going to start bringing paddleboarding to like the Summer Olympics or something. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, yes, time to train. Like, I'm ready. I'm actually not that good, but I do enjoy it. It's one of my favorite activities. And so anyway, it's finally warm enough for paddleboarding. And so that's what I'm celebrating today, is that this next weekend, I'm going to be taking my paddleboard out onto the lake and having a good time. So
awesome.
it's been about a year since I've gotten to go, because they shut the lakes down for a while around here, but it's time now. So we're doing it. That's what I'm celebrating.
Fun.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Well, with that being said, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that it meant something to you. And if it did, I want to encourage you to leave a comment below, whether you're on YouTube or whatever podcasting platform you're on. Leave a comment. Also, give us 5 stars. Give us a 5-star review. And here's why I'm asking you to do this, is because when you give us a 5-star review, when you like, when you comment, when you subscribe, all of these things, it actually makes a big difference in getting this podcast into other girls' ears. And we know that conversations like we've had over the past 2 episodes are actually just so important for girls today. And we want to share that with them. So when you are commenting, liking, subscribing, all of the things, you are making a difference in people's lives. And it's just an easy way for you to do that. So be sure to do that right now. And you can also engage with us throughout the week on any social media platform. Just search for Church Girl Gang, or you can search for me at Kenzie Carisse. But we're always posting lots of encouraging content and stuff that you can share with your friends. So with that being said, we love you. We hope to see you back here next week for a brand new podcast episode. But with that being said, have a great week, Church Girl. We'll talk to you soon.